start with a little bit of your personal journey into the world of veganism. What kind of brought you here?
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for having me on, Jim. So my story into veganism is it was quite a long journey, to be honest. I was not somebody who was kind of easily turned vegan by a kind of specific person or a specific event. I was very much a meat eater growing up. I think my kind of first exposure to the idea was my older brother, actually, who went vegetarian when I was about 15, I think. And I remember I used to kind of, take the mickey out of him a little bit, and I didn't really understand it at the time, and but he never really kind of liked animal products that much anyway. Never really enjoyed meat. But I was a big meat eater, and I think I remember one formative kind of moment was where I was playing five-a-side football with some friends, and there was a caterpillar going across the football pitch, like this little concrete football pitch, and I spent ages. I must have spent about 20 minutes or so just kind of shepherding it across the football pitch, making sure the football didn't hit it, making sure nobody trod on it, and I've always had that kind of like sensitivity, I guess, around animals. But I think so. That was the moment when I think I connected it with, the breakfast I'd had that morning and stuff. I kind of really made that connection. So I went at that stage. I thought I'm going to try going vegetarian for 2 weeks. I didn't have a clue what veganism was, I don't think, at that time in my life. And then and that just worked for me. So I stayed vegetarian for many years. And then I went off to study environmental sciences. So I had an interest in environmental sciences. I studied an undergraduate in environmental sciences, and then went on to do a master's in a similar area of study. And kind of throughout that time, I understood the kind of the environmental dimensions of food production and of kind of animal farming, and the impact that that's having on the planet in terms of land use and in terms of the climate impact and water and resource use. But it still took me a very long time to get around to veganism. I think I was there in terms of my values and my understanding, and I was kind of trying to get there. I'd kind of sampled some plant milks, and I was seeing if I could, maybe I can get ethical eggs. I was looking around doing a bit of research. I was never quite happy with it. But eventually I got there, and I actually met my partner around the same time, who was vegan when I met her. So that kind of was the final step I needed, really, is kind of somebody else in my life that was supportive. So it took me about 15 years of kind of flip-flopping. But I got there, and I've been vegan now for about 5 years. So that was my kind of journey.
I'm interested in, you mentioned that the environmental issues sort of became front and center for you, at least when you were studying. Was that something that was formally taught, or was that something that you found through your own research? Because I'm always interested whether kind of these formal institutions, universities in these kind of studies, sort of are putting their finger squarely at animal agriculture and saying, this is a big cause.
Yeah, really good question. And I think at the time where I was studying, I would say no, they weren't really. That connection wasn't really formally made, and it wasn't much of a discussion within, the kind of student body or with the lecturers and stuff at that time. Although it did definitely come up, the issue of meat eating and the kind of the impact of that. But it really wasn't well understood, I don't think, within the kind of environmental community, environmental researchers, and the sheer scale of the impact, I don't think was quite understood. It was more about kind of understanding it and kind of reading around the subject that I think I arrived at it. But from what I understand, and just from looking at the kind of the positions of like mainstream environmental organizations and the kind of interests of research organizations and university departments that I've kind of come across since then, I think it is becoming more topical, and there is a kind of desire from those sort of institutions to discuss the issues of animal agriculture, if not necessarily from a vegan point of view.
Yeah, yeah. It sort of fascinates me that because it seems so logically, the issue or an issue, a large proportion of the issue, and you've got the UN's long shadow report and so on, and many others that have come afterwards. So just interested to know whether it's sort of from that background it became apparent. So interesting to hear it was kind of there, but not kind of squarely, and that it's evolving. Absolutely. At what point did you come across the vegan society and I suppose crucially then start working in the organisation?
I think I was aware of the Vegan Society when I was a couple of years before I started working with them. I know my partner was actually a member of the Vegan Society, but I didn't really know much about them at the time. I'd kind of heard about them, but I joined in. I was looking for a kind of some working in the area of campaigns and policy, and something that I kind of was in line with my passions and what I kind of believed in, and that a job came up with the Vegan Society. It was October 2019, and it was actually to work on their Grow Green campaign, or our Grow Green campaign, which is about that. It's about agriculture. It's about the production side and of food, and that was something that was a particular area of interest for me, and kind of my route to veganism. So. I was looking at the UK kind of agriculture policy and what we produce here, and how we kind of subsidise farming here and all those things, and kind of it was trying to change government policy basically to make it easier for farmers in the UK to make that transition as a sector over and actually benefit from that transition to plant-based diets and vegan diets. That really appealed to me. That was, as I say, October 2019, and I've been with them since.
Yeah. And when did I take it from those very early days, the sort of seeds of inspiration for the Planting Value in Our Food System report were kind of, it sounds like they were there from the very beginning of your tenure with the Vegan Society.
Yeah, very much. Yeah. So the Planting Value in the Food System report and that work, we were what that does, I think, is it pulls together a lot of different strands and areas of thinking and areas of campaign interest. So the Vegan Society, we have a campaigns policy and research department, and we do all sorts of things. Within that department, we've got dietitians that give advice on nutrition. We've got people who work on rights and on rights for vegans in the workplace and things like that. We've got people who look at the connections between look at research connections and what we can do in the world of kind of academia, and then we've got our campaigns and policy teams that look at both convincing more people to try veganism and to stay vegan, and also the kind of policy initiatives, the things that are institutional opportunities and barriers towards more people going vegan. So we've got this whole kind of host of areas, and obviously not all of those relate to food. Veganism's broader than food, but a lot of them touch on food, and food's obviously a central issue. It's where most of the exploited animals are, and it's the way most people engage with veganism initially. So we wanted something that kind of pulled those things together and was a bit more of a coherent look at the food system and its issues. And I think where that came from was we would, I think a lot of people we speak to, whether that be politicians who might be interested or open to our ideas, or other institutions, environmental campaigns, and people like that, they're not necessarily against or opposed to our objectives and our aims for a plant-based food system, but often they've got very practical concerns, and they're around they almost can't visualize how this would happen. How would we get there? And all they can see is, because it's obviously from where we are now, it's a really big jump.
Yeah.
And there's some all they can see are the problems. So the issues are, well, wouldn't it be putting farmers out of business if we were to do this? They kind of almost imagine doing it overnight. Wouldn't we be putting farmers out of business? How might we manage grasslands without these grazing animals that we use as livestock for food, and various other issues, concerns over highly processed food, because there's been that association between veganism and highly processed food in the media, and so there's all those kind of practical concerns around environment, around health, around the economy, and around work and just work. So it was about saying, well, how do we help people visualize that? How do we make people see that actually just maybe there's a practical route to this, and these problems aren't we can actually overcome these problems with a little bit of thinking, and with some sort of carefully thought through interventions. So yeah, it was about sitting around the table and listening to people from across the food system, people that agreed with us, people that didn't agree with us, and people that were kind of somewhere between the two, and yeah, kind of really listening to those concerns and looking at all the latest research and about thinking in food, and yeah, really kind of saying, well, this is our vision. This is what it would look like, and responding to those concerns through that positive vision for the food system, and also laying out a practical way of getting there through legislation. But yeah, obviously we have been thinking about that for a while, and it was quite a long time ago now that we actually engaged with Alex initially, with Alex Lockwood, the author of the report. So it's Dr. Alex Lockwood from the University of Sunderland. And he was the lead author on the report, and we engaged with him a long time ago. But yeah, obviously the complexity of those issues, they took a long time to think through. Yeah, I think now we've got something which is a kind of central document, if you like, and a central piece of work that we can use to engage with people from across the food system, and demonstrate that we've kind of thought about these things in depth, and that we're kind of ready to engage with their concerns as well.
I think it's an incredible way to approach things, and clearly the right one, and so needed in this these sort of divided times of reaching out across the divide, if you like, and speaking to people within, whether it be the farming community and politicians, etc. People, like you say, who often disagree. What was that? Was that always kind of baked in from the very beginning? Was that something you wanted to do? And was there a particular kind of short list of people that you wanted to get to, or was it more of a come one, come all? We want to get as many people around the table as possible.
Yeah, well, this is something that we kind of Alex kind of developed, I guess, as a research methodology, but something we wanted to do from the start. We wanted a way of getting around the table and listening to people that we hadn't been hearing from in detail up until that point, and kind of getting all their ideas together. So yeah, there was a lot of discussion around how broad is this exercise? How had to make decisions. How useful is it to speak to people who are really kind of vitriolically and kind of deeply opposed to us, sort of thing. Yeah. So there was a kind of practical decision made around, well, actually, so while we did speak to people who don't agree, when we spoke to animal farmers, we spoke to Welsh sheep farmers, and we spoke to mixed farmers and dairy farmers. What we didn't go and speak to those people who just really couldn't see any value in what we were saying, and didn't really understand where we were coming from at all. So we're speaking to the kind of almost the progressive elements, if you like, of those groups, to understand where might the opportunities be to accommodate some of their concerns, but within a vegan philosophy. So yeah, that's kind of how we made that decision. And actually, I heard Alex say something really interesting about that, which was like, if you if we agree with you 80%,
Mm.
then we want to work with you, and in a very meaningful and a very proactive way. So I think that's a good way to think about it.
I'm interested in, there being this. I think sometimes in the sort of quote unquote vegan community, there can be a sense of, and I think it's a misplaced one in the main, that farmers are the kind of the enemy. And I remember a conversation I had with a different Alex Lockwood, actually, the director, a while back, and he was talking about Jay and Katia Wild, who I know that the Vegan Society kind of helped out in sort of veganising their farm and so on. And what was kind of fascinating, and I was quite relatively new into the podcast at that point, and I don't know what hadn't struck me before. It was like, well, farming is still integral to any system that you have in place, any food-based system, whether it's animals at the centre of it, which obviously we want to avoid, or it's plants, which I know sounds obvious to us now, but at the time, coming from that sort of omnivorous base at the beginning and building my knowledge, it was sort of new news. And I'm just interested in, you mentioned these progressive kind of farmers who perhaps are dairy farmers but have this thought process. Was there a sense, in the conversations with them, that they understood there was limited mileage in what they were doing, from a resource point of view and so on and so forth, and that their reason was, this is something I've built for many, many years, decades, etc., and switching it is not something that I can readily do. Was that generally the kind of concern, and indeed the thing that they'd spotted for the reason for them being progressive and even wanting to have a conversation with you? Was it because they saw there was a bit of writing on the wall, if you like?
Yes, to an extent, I think there was. I think the more overwhelming reason was more that they. Their vision for the food system might have been that more one of a kind of avoiding intensive farming. Right. They agreed with this maybe to the extent that they could see a significant reduction in the consumption of animal products. Maybe an 80% reduction, maybe a 90% reduction, but that they felt that modern animal agriculture was something that that really kind of worried them, and kind of right. was dead against their ethics, and they were quite difficult conversations to have because, but at the same time, some of them might have been, and some of them did open up and say, but I do feel uncomfortable about, sending my animals to slaughter, or, those sorts of things, and I think, they have their own ethics, and they all have their own individual ethics and way of looking at it. I think one of the farmers we engaged with, his daughter was vegan, so that was obviously something that was a conversation that they'd had to navigate within their household and within and so that had obviously opened his mind, although he wasn't convinced about veganism, he was he got where we were coming from, and I think one of the key things that we had to do throughout the report, and that Alex did really well in the interviews, was work out what it was about their business, and about their connection with the land, and about their connection to what they did as a kind of part of their identity. What was it about that was really a value, and was there a way to capture that in a plant-based system in an appealing way to those, and see what's actually what connects you to this, and what gives you a source of value and identity as a farmer, and how can we capture that in our vision for a food system, because that's really important. If we don't sketch that out, and make that appealing, and kind of explain how that is an appealing vision for food production, then there's going to be much more inclined. People are going to be much more inclined to just tie themselves to old systems, out of fear almost of what would be replacing it.
Yeah, absolutely. From your perspective, thinking about the what's kind of the various groups that need to get on board for something like this to be adopted as serious kind of policy and a way to move forward. forgive me for being reductive here, but you got sort of, the farmers on one side, politicians, the general public, and the hearts and minds there. Which group is it? All three that need to be kind of, ready to take this change on for this to happen, or do you think the work of the vegan society, the vegan community, quote unquote, as a wider whole, the work needs to be done more with the general public because politicians will act off the back of that? Where's your mind at in terms of, policy, farming, the public, in terms of where our focus should lie?
Yeah, that's a really, really tough question, actually, and my answer is going to be a bit of a cop-out, but in a way, because the way I view it is that you need all of these elements to kind of respond to each other. They have a reflexive relationship. So yes, politicians aren't gonna move on, legislating to help to enable that change to plant-based, unless they see it as a large constituency of people who are already driven enough and believe that to a big enough extent that they've made changes in their personal life. Likewise, food manufacturers and food producers aren't going to respond to that unless they've got signals from people saying that that's what they want. But at the same time, we don't make off, the people who buy food, me and you, and everybody else, food users, if you like, we don't. We make those choices in an environment. We don't make those choices in a vacuum. So we make those choices based on what food we have access to, what food is marketed to us, what the cost of that food is, the information we have about the how healthy that food is, and things like that, and also a load of other cultural factors that kind of restrain or inform those choices. So you need all of those things, and I think even companies, kind of entrepreneurs that bring new food manufacturing technologies to the market, and vegan companies that actually make vegan food really nice and appealing and are marketing it to people and making it available to people. Those people really make a difference, in what choices we make and how many of us are vegan. And likewise, government policy, it can do things that are really important, like affect the price of different foods. Our trade agreements are subsidies, agricultural subsidies, various government schemes. They can affect the price and accessibility and availability of food, and even where it's advertised, what food we see when we're out and about, and kind of what's pushed onto us, if you like. So the approach that we take at the Vegan Society is that we try and work on all of those things. We identify where the barriers are and where the opportunities are, and then run a campaign on those. So it might be a good time to just give you a couple of examples of those sort of campaigns, actually. Some couple of recent examples are our Vegan and Thriving campaign, and that in the kind of latest iteration of that campaign, we've been getting information into GP surgeries, and also into online as well, and into various other places that people can access it out and about, including kind of health messages basically, and also recipes and things like that. And that's very kind of carefully targeted at people who might want to go vegan but have concerns over the health element of it, or might want to take more control over their diet, and could see a healthy vegan diet as an opportunity to do that. So so we have that, but we also have our Future Normal campaign, and that's really getting people to think about their relationship with animals and reflect on that relationship, again with some online resources and some advertising that people can see when they're out and about. We've also got our Plate Up for the Planet campaign. That's a bit like the Veganuary challenge, but it's a shorter 7-day challenge, and it's really heavily focused on people who are concerned about the environment, concerned about climate change. So that's going to be a really important campaign for us in the run-up to the COP26 conference, so the climate conference that's being held in Glasgow in November this year. So yeah, that's a kind of a few examples of the kind of the range of areas we work, and yeah, like I say, we tackle all of those things, all of those kind of key areas, rather than just focusing on just policy or focusing on just kind of consumer behaviour.
Just thinking about some of those, because all fantastic campaigns, and thinking about, like, you know, the future normal and so on and so forth, and you know, I've seen that campaign and I think it is excellent, and you know, wonderfully kind of put together. Feels very relevant to how some people might be feeling right now, you know, through the kind of this enforced period of reflection and so on. Are you seeing much traction from sort of the wider kind of omnivorous population who have gone through some kind of moment of reflection and are turning to the Vegan Society for that first port of call from, you know, from an information standpoint off the back of some of these campaigns? Does it feel like they're gaining some momentum?
Yeah, I mean, it does feel like that. It's obviously hard to tell. Yeah. You know, without kind of really you need to look in the long term to see if these things are working. But it does feel like that. You know, we do get engagement with these campaigns, and we can track that engagement, and so we know people are hitting the website and you know, engaging with the kind of resources that we've got. And we get inquiries from new vegans as well coming in to the society, looking for information and advice, or saying they've seen a campaign and they like it, or they've seen a campaign they don't like it. So yeah, I think there is that conversation going on with omnivores, and it's definitely kind of vegan adjacent people, if you like, that we're talking to a lot of the time when it comes to individual behaviour change, who are nearly there but just need a little, you know, a kind of another conversation about it, or something just to address those final worries they might have. But yeah, I mean, one thing we do track is we do a survey every few years called How Many Vegans, and that's basically the most reliable data that is collected in the UK about how many vegans there actually are, and looks at those trends. We haven't been able to do that for a while because of the way the methodology that we use for that hasn't been possible throughout COVID, and we wanted to keep that consistent kind of methodology so that it was could really be easily compared to previous years. But the last time we did that, in I think we released the data in early 2019, it was around 600,000 vegans in the UK, and that was a significant increase from 2014, where it was approximately 150,000. So I think there's good reasons to believe that trend has continued, and that we could be over 1 million vegans in the UK now. But you know, we're not going to know until we get that data in. But you know, if it's followed that trend, certainly the vegan movement and the vegan kind of ethic and philosophy is taking hold and is increasing year on year. And you know, I hope we are contributing to that as an organisation.
I think absolutely are. I mean, whether it's the campaigns, like you say, that work with the policies, and this new report, I think, you know, comes at it from an incredible angle, which I think the phrase Alex used was, you know, having something shovel ready for when and if a government kind of needs it. It's there. Here it is. And on that note, actually, I just wanted to ask a question and get your sort of thought on this, because you know, I see. And obviously, you know, as somebody in the sort of vegan community, I'm kind of always conscious of, you know, you feel like you're in a bit of an echo chamber sometimes, and you know, I wonder whether I feel like things are gathering faster paced than perhaps they are, just because I'm submerged in sort of vegan media. But you know, I do see, like, you know, mainstream adverts. I think there was one narrated by Stephen Fry for Sainsbury's recently that was talking about you know, eating a more plant-based diet and so on and so forth. And you know, like you say, I think there has been a bit of a moment of I think through this moment of reflection, I think people are turning, those vegan adjacent folks, certainly people I know anecdotally, who are asking some of those questions and wanting to reach out to the Vegan Society and so on and so forth. You mentioned something a while back though that I wanted to pick up on around politicians, which was, thinking about where they that sometimes they have a part to play, as well as companies, in kind of marketing or letting an idea take hold. Whether it be from a government point of view, it might be how inexpensive or expensive a taxation system might make food, and so on and so forth. These kind of things, they all have this influence, and the relationship's kind of symbiotic. I'm interested in whether you see any politicians who are kind of looking for almost ways to help convince the general public from a viewpoint of, it might be that they're concerned with climate change, it might be they're concerned with food security, even from a Brexit standpoint, is it that there's a concern over actually this food system that you're proposing would be much better off for us because it gives us control, sovereignty over our food production. We're not using 2.5 times the land of the UK to make the food that we need, etc. Are you seeing any politicians kind of thinking that way and trying to think of ways to help the public along?
I think, there are certainly a few politicians who are vegan themselves, and who really passionately believe that's the kind of system we need. It becomes difficult when it gets to a kind of party political level, I think, in that they're very restrained, and obviously within our kind of primarily two-party system, they're very restrained by the party line in terms of what they can say that will fall outside of that. But there certainly is politicians who are vegan, and politicians who are maybe not quite vegan, but would see that that's where our food system is heading for all those reasons you outlined, for climate reasons or food security reasons. We are having those conversations. We actually have an all-party parliamentary group, an APPG. So this is a group of MPs and that's for veganism and vegetarianism. So this is a group of vegan and vegetarian MPs who we discuss these issues as a group, and we have guest speakers to come and talk about health and environment. That was something that Alex actually gave a talk to speak to MPs about the planting value in the food system report. Politicians are definitely interested. I think a really important thing from politicians, as well as the policies themselves that can actually facilitate a change, is confidence in that direction. So I think we had Kwasi Kwarteng, who I think is the business secretary at the moment. He said at the US kind of climate convention that vegans were making a positive contribution to in their response to climate change. And messages like that are actually really important because they send a message to the country, send a message to companies, and they send a message to the public that actually this isn't a fringe idea. This is something that can help towards meeting our kind of national, international obligations. But at the moment we haven't got much kind of policy follow through on that, and that's a shame because we've had, most recently the National Food Strategy, which announced, which recommends a 30% reduction in the consumption of animal products. Before that, earlier in the year, we had the Committee on Climate Change in its 6th carbon budget. That also recommended significant reductions in animal products. And that was the one recommendation from the Committee on Climate Change that the government explicitly ignored. So they kind of said, well, we are going to adopt all of this, but not quite all of it, and they dropped that bit in particular. So there's obviously still a taboo around the idea, but I think that's a taboo that is changing very quickly. And I think, and I hope, this might be wishful thinking, but I feel that in a few years, perhaps 3 years, 5 years, it will be something that politicians can talk openly about and talk openly about the benefits of that, without too much fear of kind of backlash.
Yeah, it definitely feels like there is albeit a slow, but a sea change. There are things. Just the link, the climate change, veganism link. You hear more and more and more in places that I think even 4 or 5 years ago you wouldn't have heard those two ever being linked. You talked about your experience in university. You're now hearing it on morning television. That kind of link. So I'm sort of cautiously optimistic. I think my sort of biggest concern, I guess, is the time, and how long these things take. And I think Alex said something which is probably true, but also kind of scary, that it might take a significant climate event of some description to really get people to make that link, and certainly get governments into that place. I hope not, and I think the kind of the report that you put together here with Alex, the work you're doing around policy and so on, I think let's hope we can get people there without that. But when we think about the different angles that can capture hearts and minds of omnivorous folk, and obviously as vegans for a while, we the old adage of you come for the health and stay for the animals, or those kind of things. I think that we're probably more focused on kind of animal welfare and so on. But do you think that climate change is probably the key area, if you're thinking about this strategically from a hearts and minds point of view, with the general population?
Yeah, I definitely think climate change is the key area when it comes to speaking to institutions and speaking to governments and government bodies about veganism, because that's an area where they squarely have a responsibility, and everyone expects them to act on climate change. There's an overwhelming majority of the public feel, and this is borne out by polling data, that the government has a responsibility to act on climate change and bring us in line with a kind of a climate-friendly future, if you like, a future that avoids climate catastrophe. So, to the extent that veganism is a core part of that, then we have a real opportunity speaking with those institutions. But it's usually, when we look at kind of data in terms of individual decision making and individual behaviour change, it usually comes a kind of close third behind those other two factors. So behind animal rights or compassion, animal welfare, and then health. And I think the health one's interesting because it's really about people, I think, wanting to take control of their diets and what they eat. And I think doing that through veganism, people often find a healthy diet by kind of using veganism to take a little bit of control and have a little bit more active thought over what they're putting in their bodies. It is an interesting one, and I find that puzzling because that for me was a really important factor, and that's what I spend a lot of my time thinking about, as well as in terms of my role at the Vegan Society, those kind of climate and ecological questions, which are really, really pressing. But yeah, I think for most vegans these days, it is a combination of the three, and having that personal motivation when it, that relationship with animals that's really visceral, that idea of concern about what they put in their body and health, and also having that kind of global and kind of social motivation around climate and ecological emergency is, I think, a really powerful combination. So usually comes third when we poll it, but that's what people say, and what people say isn't always actually, really what motivated them. And I know we all kind of tell a story, don't we? And we think that things happen in a certain way. Like in my story earlier to you, talking about the caterpillar, I don't know if that's something that I just reflect on and remember now and feel was important, or whether it was important at the time. But yeah.
Yeah, like they say, you can only join the dots looking backwards. It's
exactly. Yeah.
I think you're right. We're sort of pattern forming creatures, aren't we? We're pretty good at creating a narrative. So yeah, it's interesting to see. 'Cause I'd love to. I mean, not that they would ever release it, but I'd love to see the Netflix data on the varying documentaries and which ones kind of land the most. And I suppose the next step is, I've spoken to a lot of people, you probably have too, watched Cowspiracy or Seaspiracy and sort of, oh, that's bad, and then not done anything about it, and I sort of find that doubly baffling. But people are interesting creatures.
Yeah, absolutely, and social creatures as well. I think the thing about those documentaries, documentaries are so effective at getting people talking about veganism. But I think a lot of it depends. They might watch it and then speak to their friends about it, and a lot of what happens afterwards really depends. Depends how it landed. So if their friends said, "I watched it too. Actually, it really affected me," and they have a really positive conversation about that, then it can lead them to veganism. If they say, if they start a conversation with their friends about it and they said, "Oh, you didn't listen to that, vegan propaganda, did you?" Then, then they have a very different reaction. So I think, that thing about having vegan family members and vegan friends that and you like and you can talk openly to, that really affects people as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, case in point, I remember talking to somebody about Cowspiracy, and they talked to me about how it had been debunked on a Joe Rogan podcast, and I thought, oh, okay, right. I tried to direct them back to the sources of where Cowspiracy got their information, the Oxford University report, etc. But Joe Rogan was better research, apparently. So
Joe Rogan, a very powerful influence. Well, this is the power of podcasts. So
yeah, I haven't got his audience just yet, but hopefully one day,
not quite yet,
we can sort of be the vegan Joe Rogan, slightly less alt-right, but there you go. I wanted to ask a question on food. We talked about the food being, and the health benefits and so on. I remember when probably after I'd done some, because I went, my journey was going through Cowspiracy. I watched Cowspiracy that day. It was like, right, first of all, actually, I checked out the sources of information on their website. So I thought, well, this can't all be true. And then once I'd seen enough, UN report, Oxford University, I was kind of like, where has this information been hiding? And made the switch there and then. But probably the third or fourth website I went to after I'd done that research was the Vegan Society, because you then think, right, I need to figure out, how do I do this, from the health standpoint. Am I going to keel over and die within the next sort of 3 weeks? These kind of the natural concerns, because of all the things that have been ingrained in us since we were children. And I think one of the things that's been apparent to me over just the last 4 and a bit years, the choice has become abundant. You mentioned that there's this link that's being made, and I don't think it's necessarily an incorrect one in some cases, where people's view of veganism is processed food. I don't think it needs to be, but I think that's the view, because they're seeing these, there's many vegan news sources on social media that talk about progress in terms of whether Nestle have released a Kit Kat and these kind of things, and there's something about it sort of irks at me a little bit, that there may be a cause for concern, if you like, and at least a dialing up required of the message around how to eat healthily, whether it's vegan or not, but ideally vegan, from the point of view that if we don't address that, we could end up losing people once they come in, because they think the only way to do this is by eating processed cheese and processed meat, like doing exactly what they were doing before. Do you see that as kind of a valid concern and something we need to make sure that we do address and dial up that volume in the right way?
Yeah, I do. I do think it's a valid concern, and that's exactly why we do put resources into. So we've got a team of 2 dietitians now, and we focus on things like the need for most people to supplement and supplement B12, and you can get vegan multivitamins now.
Veg One, no less.
Veg One, no less. Yeah, we do.
The one I personally use.
Great. And other multivitamins are available.
They are.
But we sell Veg One, and so that is a valid concern, I think. And as you say, if we do find that there's a movement of people who are drawn to veganism but don't necessarily take much care in their overall diets, or take much interest in those nutritional elements of it, then we are going to find a lot of people who aren't getting as much out of those diets, aren't finding them to be fulfilling for them and their health and well-being, and ultimately it's going to affect the growth of the movement. So I think at the moment, if you look at kind of there's population studies that look at the health of vegans, the health outcomes of vegans compared to other groups with different diets. We perform pretty well. We're a fairly healthy bunch compared to other kind of dietary groups. And there's some well-known, obviously, benefits of at least not overeating animal products that vegans benefit from. So there is a real opportunity there, and we need to, in order to be able to kind of maintain that message, to say, look, you can really thrive on a vegan diet, and the data and the evidence bears that out. We need most vegans to have some awareness of nutrition and to be eating those kind of whole food diets. So yeah, I mean, we promote whole food diets primarily. Obviously, pulses are incredibly important. So your lentils, your beans, your peas, and actually they match up really nicely with some of the best performing diets in terms of environment. So these whole food diets with lots of seasonal vegetables and pulses are some of the most sustainable diets that you can get as well. So those things match up really nicely. But yeah, I think there's barriers to that for some people, though, aren't there? So cooking being one of them, having the space and the time and the knowledge to learn how to cook a wide variety of foods from scratch, and in a way that you enjoy and that you like. So it does take a little bit of time, and it takes some adaptation. So I think it is also important just to do the kind of basics for vegans, and that's get some nice, easy, healthy recipes out there, and encourage people to share them and talk about them, and talk about those things as well. And I think there is kind of legislation that can help with that. So obviously in the National Food Strategy, it talked about tax on high sugar and high fat, highly processed foods. So that's the kind of thing that could make vegan products healthier, because after all, it's about highly processed or not highly processed. And I think there is a variety of, not all kind of manufactured products are high sugar or high salt or high fat. Some of them are actually relatively simple ingredients, and actually, really pretty good at providing kind of vegan protein. So I don't want to kind of preach to the vegans out there who are thinking, well, does that mean I can't have a vegan sausage sandwich or whatever? No, absolutely not. That's an important part of my diet as well, and of all of our diets. But yeah, it's about having that balance, isn't it? And making sure people have got the kind of opportunities and knowledge to have those kind of whole foods as well.
Sage advice, Tim. As I would have expected. Where would folks? Because time is against us. I've taken up enough of your time. It's been great chatting with you. But where would folks go to? First of all, read the Planting Value in Our Food System report, and secondly, check out some of the other campaigns that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. So hit our website. Just type in the Vegan Society, Google the Vegan Society, and hit our website. And you can go to the campaigns tab on our website, or campaigns hub, where we've got all the campaigns there, and people can read a bit more about them, explore them. We've also got a microsite for the Planting Value report, and that's plantingvalueinfood.org. So they can go directly there to find that out. But you can also access that from our main website as well. So plantingvalueinfood.org to check out the food systems report, and vegansociety.com to go on our main site and look at those recipes and check out the campaigns.
100%. That microsite, it was a real education eye opener for me. Like, I thought that report was fantastic, and it was a great resource to help you navigate it in sort of simple terms, and you could get deeper and deeper as you wanted to. So yeah, appreciate the work. I think it's incredible.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, and there's some little animation on there as well that people can watch, and you can download the reports from there as well if you want to kind of read them in more depth. But yeah, been a real pleasure, and thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate it. Speak soon.
Cheers. Bye.
I just drove around usually for 20. I had a radar hit, and it was going like 30 knots, and there was something there. It looked like it didn't look like a bird. It looked like them getting a rock. I mean,